This was my first year of teaching. And I walked into to Power Ranch Elementary School, which was actually a K-8 school. It was my first job as a middle school band director. It was called an elementary school, but it was a K-8 school. And I only had one band. It was a 6th grade band because 7th and 8th grade hadn't started yet because it was a brand new school. And I walked in there, and there were 8 kids in my band. And I was like, oh yeah, I just graduated with my master's from Arizona State, blah, and I was conducting in Argentina and China at the time, which was kind of cool. And I walked in there, and there was these 8 kids, and I was just like, I was frustrated. And, we had a little rehearsal, and I left. And I remember I called my dad, and my dad was everything to me. And I lost him to cancer a little over 2 years ago. And I called him, and I was like, he's like, hey, how was your first day? And my dad, everything that I kind of am today, as far as I can sort of attribute to him. And I'm like, Dad, they weren't good. It wasn't good. It wasn't, they don't know how to play. It's like, this is awful. And he's like, I'm going to tell you one thing. I'm like, all right. And he's like, and then I'm going to hang up on you. And I'm like, all right. He's like, those kids deserve better than you. He's like, don't call me back. And I call my dad every day. He's like, don't call me back until you've given them everything that they deserve. He's like, I don't know anything about band or teaching, but those kids are there for a reason, and they deserve better than you, and you need to fix it. And I was just like, oh. But I'm not going to lie, man. Like that is seared into my DNA. And so, and I tell my kids, it doesn't matter what group I'm working with, they get all of me when I'm in front of them. There's no distraction. There's no nothing. It doesn't matter what level it is. It doesn't matter where it is or who it is. When I'm in front of my A group, or if it's my TU group, they are my world. And I make sure that they know that. And so that's the first thing that I tell them. And I find that the music making is much more sort of intimate. And they know that by the way I talk with them. And it goes back to the music that I give them.
Welcome to Music Ed Tech Talk, a podcast exploring music, education, technology, and the intersections between them, with a special focus on the productive and creative process. I'm your host, Robby Burns. Thanks to my sponsor this week, Music First. With me today is Chris Cicconi, Assistant Professor of Music Education and Director of Bands and Orchestra at Towson University. How's it going, Chris?
It's going well. Thanks for having me on your podcast. I'm a big fan of it.
I appreciate that. The idea of having fans is unique to me.
I told you this when we spoke a few days ago. Like I direct all my kids, all my music ed students to your website for the various podcasts, but also for the section that you have on your website from music tech, from exercise tech, to how you manage your life tech. I'm serious. And so there's some of those apps on there where I need to get that. And once you talked about your Apple Watch, when you talked about when you were running and you did everything with your Apple Watch, I finally convinced my wife that we're both going to get an Apple Watch here very soon.
Oh, that's amazing.
Very excited.
That's so exciting. Wow. And then you can use all the exercise tech on that page.
All the exercise tech. And I know that you have on your website that you're a big fan of the Apple Pencil. And I can tell you from experience that I had this morning, the Apple Pencil doesn't work very well when your child throws it under the couch.
Because it's lost or because it's broken?
It didn't break. You just can't reach it when it's under the couch. So I got it, and I have it now, but I was looking for it. But I just want you to know, for your listeners, the Apple Pencil doesn't work when it's under the couch.
Yeah, absolutely the case. I can't live without that thing. I'm fortunate that my child has not really... Like, he could get it if he really wanted it to. I keep the iPad. I have the cover. I have the older version of the keyboard case.
Okay.
I have the newer one, too, because I'm just a little extra like that. But I have the older one that's all fully enclosed, so you can spill water on it and everything. And I actually will just let him, smash his hands all over that one. He gets pretty excited when he's on the phone with his grandma.
We don't touch Daddy's iPad. They have their own little one that's in, an OtterBox, which means we can throw it off our balcony and it will still work. But the iPad Pro that I have with the Apple Pencil, they aren't supposed to use, but it was upstairs because I was doing some work on it last night, and all of a sudden, he chucked the pencil underneath the couch. So and we have not a couch that's easy to move. You have to actually take it apart to get it.
Yikes.
Yeah, so
I don't like hearing that at all.
Yeah. But anyways, I'm excited to be here.
Yeah. Hey, we've got all sorts of things to talk about involving teaching college kids during COVID. We've got choosing repertoire. You mentioned the iPad Pro. We might as well. You bought an iPad Pro very recently.
I did.
What are some of the apps that you are enjoying for your work? What are the ones that are like changing, that you either just really, or that are changing the way that you do your work in a way you didn't anticipate?
So the one I took from your show or your podcast that you did about a couple months ago, when you talked about LumaFusion. That app I downloaded immediately, and being the user interface, and actually it's extremely user friendly, that I use to make the virtual concerts where the students submit their recordings. And I'm actually having my students, most of them in the class that you met with are using that same app as well. As far as virtual teaching, with that, I'll use the Tonal Energy app, which I think that's the all-in-all app I love that app, and it's easy to share via Zoom or any of that, and so I'll use that a lot. forScore, as far as I use that with a lot of my conducting students. The thing that I like about that is when we talk about score study and marking the score, it's so easy to put that up on the screen, and we can compare our notes if we're showing phrase markings or how we mark a score, or what abbreviations we use for instruments and all of that. And so that one has been a favorite of mine, and I'm pretty sure you may have put that on my Facebook when I put it out there that I have an iPad Pro and I need people to tell me what apps I'm supposed to get.
forScore and Tonal Energy are the apps, specifically forScore, but they're two of the apps. When you think of like a Mac, like just a computer, traditional computer, there's software that you just can't do mobile. The recording stuff comes to mind, like Logic Pro or Ableton Live, or in the engraving world, you have stuff like Sibelius. Like these are not apps that have come to mobile yet.
Right.
So when you think of what are the things that take advantage of the form factor of a tablet and that you just can't get a good experience on anywhere else, forScore is like the exact example. Like the iPad is so thin, it's like a perfect slab of glass.
Right.
It's like basically like a glass piece of paper. And the Apple Pencil annotation is so good. Like you can't have that experience on a Mac, even if you could run the app on a Mac.
I think the other one too that is used for both. I think GarageBand on even iMovie, when I helped my wife put together a few projects at the end of last year, I think both of those, I think they're part of the iLife suite, but I think both of those apps work. I like them better for iOS devices as opposed to the Mac itself. I think they're way more user-friendly and easier to manipulate just by the drop and drag that you can do on an iPad that you can't do on a desktop.
Yeah, and the apps, when you have a piano on the screen that you can just touch with your finger, like it takes away all the abstraction.
Sure. Well, playing piano is pretty abstract for me anyways, but we don't need to go there.
Yeah, but no, I totally get it. But those are definitely the apps, and they're not. GarageBand is not as powerful on an iPad as it is on a Mac. And I think this is an interesting thing that the Apple Pencil as like a creative and professional tool has taken the iPad to this level. Because when the iPad came out, you could see for a musician the benefit of dragging a movie clip from left to right with your finger, or tapping on a keyboard or a digital string instrument. And then with the Apple Pencil, you have stuff like Staff Pad. Have you tried that one at all yet? I know it's a pricey one.
I haven't used that, but the one that I did want to tell you, I think that, and you spoke about this, I feel like I'm just reiterating all the things that you have told me to do. But what was the one that I use? Oh, it's either GoodNotes or OneNote. One of those I used.
GoodNotes is definitely the one that I recommend.
And so, like, I used that the other day in my conducting class, and I was able to share the screen on my iPad, and then what they were having trouble with non-focal point conducting beat patterns, and I was able to illustrate that right on there and actually draw the patterns and where the icti, however you want to say it, how they were all formed there, and the kids got a way better idea because a lot of them are visual learners, and so them seeing the patterns that I was drawing out with the Apple Pencil as I was sharing my screen on that app on GoodNotes was extremely effective.
Yeah, GoodNotes is great. It's like its strength is a handwriting note app that takes advantage of the Apple Pencil, but I personally like it as a digital whiteboard. I think it's great for that, having this blank canvas.
Sure.
So when you're using forScore, because this is something that I wanted to ask you, I do almost all of my score reading for the middle school band in forScore, but one of my two bands is mostly sixth grade students. So sometimes we're ending the year on 0.51 literature, and
Sure.
I can go up on stage and conduct that from memory,
Right.
and make all my cues and everything all the way up through. If you're doing it every day in class, you can probably up through like a grade level 4 or even 5 if you've rehearsed it enough. You can get by without the score.
Right.
So speaking to someone who is doing repertoire that's got a lot more moving parts, are you finding, like, I never have trouble seeing everything on the iPad screen, and even when I don't, I'm good at the pinch to zoom really
Sure.
quick. Is forScore tenable for the advanced level repertoire you're doing?
So let me tell you how I use it. And so forScore I use primarily for score study. I can always have that with me. Most of the scores that I'm doing right now are on those 11 by 17 pages, and it's basically every single instrument gets their own line. So you put 40 or 50 instruments onto the iPad screen. It gets a little hairy because of the iPad's 12 or almost 13 inches.
Yeah.
But the thing that I use it for most is the score study aspect of it, where I'm tearing it apart through there. It's great because the thing that, and I tell my students this, when I study a score, let's say we were getting ready to do Mann's Fourth Symphony, I always have a score study score, and then I have a score that I'll do the concert with. And the score that I do the concert with has not a single thing written into it because I don't want to be tied to whatever marking that I made. So if I'm feeling something's going to happen in a different way at the concert, I don't have like a crutch there. Like, oh wait, there's a red mark. Why did I put that there? And I always have a blank score up there with me when I'm actually conducting. But when I'm doing score study, I'm tearing that thing apart with colors. I'm down to 2 colors now. When I first started my score study process, I was probably using 15 colors, and my score looked like a comic book. But I'll tear that thing apart. Lincolnshire Posey, for example, like I'm going through, I can't even tell you how many times I've studied that score. The thing that I like about forScore then is if I redo a piece, I can just wipe out. I can save the score in forScore, so I have my old interpretation in there, but then start over from the blank canvas, which is the score, and then go from there. So I'm not influenced by what I did before. So it's a fresh approach about it. And the analogy I give is if you listen to Yo-Yo Ma play the Bach cello suites when he first started, and then you listen to him play them now, it doesn't even sound like the same person. And so that's the one big thing as far as the score reading that I use forScore for. It's the best for that because financially it's way better because a lot of those scores will cost $100, $150, and now I just have to buy one. I import it. I study everything on the iPad, and I'll rehearse a lot of the time is from the iPad, or it'll be there, so I make sure that I have all my markings or all my notes that I scribble down. But then from the concert, it'll be a blank score. Then when I revisit it, I can take that score, make a new one, and then just go from there.
Yeah, totally. The version history is very helpful.
Yes.
And going back to old versions can be useful. I have pieces that I've conducted recently that I encountered or studied like pretty early on in my career where I was like just forming an emotional relationship with
Sure.
teaching the subject. And so I go back sometimes to those scores and I feel like I connect with something in the spirit of the piece that was like very fresh to me at that time. So it's equally good for revisiting as much as it is discarding your old ideas.
It keeps you sharp, and it keeps your score study techniques and your rehearsal techniques at the forefront. And your score study will evolve as you evolve as a music educator, and it's something that you should never stop doing. And I'm a big fan of that, and that's saved me a lot of time and space and money. The iPad fits in my little briefcase bag as opposed to a Mahler symphony, which I need a special art bag case for because it's 6 feet long.
Exactly. Yeah. Huh. And it's funny, just speaking also to the ability to discard your notes or just save them as a version and then get a clean slate. Do you have a system that has remained the same? Like I know that there are people who are like red is for every crescendo and like this is the way I do it and it's been this way. And I just don't like, I changed my systems for how I get my work done on a minute by minute basis.
It's my process has evolved greatly. And a lot of it is basically by some of the people that I've studied with too. It's interesting because I've studied with 3 really fantastic band directors, Steve Gage at Youngstown State, Gary Hill at Arizona State, and Gary Green at the University of Miami. And they all had very distinct ways that they did things. And when you're studying with someone, you tend to gravitate towards what they do. And then it evolves. So I'm down to 2 colors, a lot like that. I'll use red and blue a lot, only because my brain is conditioned. So if I see blue, I know what I'm looking at. If I see red, I know what I'm looking at. But a lot of it then is, especially on forScore, it's just that. I'm writing a lot of notes. I'm exploring a lot of different things as far as like pitch tendencies and all of that kind of stuff. Has my score study evolved? It has. It's pared itself down a lot. And I found that at the beginning of my career, I would mark absolutely everything. Every single note had something around it. And what happens is, and Gary Green told me this, you're losing the musical intent when you tear things apart that much, which I agree with. And so I tend to then tear it apart on the iPad, and then I take a big step back, look at it holistically, and see the music as a big picture, as a bunch of different sort of separate entities. And I attribute that to like a Monet painting, if you think about it. If you get up really close, you really can't tell what you're looking at. And if you're looking at every little brush stroke and every little detail, like up with your face against the painting, you don't know what it is. And it isn't until you take that big step back with all this beautiful painting here in front of me. This is basically the big picture, for a lack of a better phrase. I have really turned that corner and always thinking more of big picture through a focused study before I actually rehearse the piece.
It's interesting to think about how much when people are doing this work of interpreting, that they might think 100,000 times more about something that a composer didn't think about at all.
It's so funny because Frank DeKelly, I met him, my last year of my doctorate, and it was awesome because Gary Green transcribed one of his pieces that we did for CBDNA, and one of the things he told the conductors was, I always love when conductors pull musical phrases and musicality out of one of my pieces that I didn't know was there. And it was such a neat thing to hear, because a lot of composers would be like, nope, read what's on the page. But it was really interesting to hear such a great composer like that say, I love it when you find things that I didn't realize that I wrote. It's the beauty of music.
One of my favorite things about him, so I work with a group called the Regional Repertory Wind Ensemble, which is, it's not specific to the Howard County public school system, but it's local to the area. So pretty much, really, it doesn't exclude anyone in Maryland. So if you're a private or a public school student, you study music, you can come and audition for this group. It happens every spring. Sure. It's been going on since about 2010. And the idea is that I've been working with the percussion section. And speaking of titles, I don't know what my title is. I do a lot of work, help with the logistic work. But what the director does is they bring in a different composer every year to conduct a concert of all of their own music.
Right.
And so the kids and it's a middle and high school group, so it's pretty wide range. Like, the experience is not to play at the highest level; it's to connect with the music.
Yeah, I know of that program. It's a fantastic program, and I'm glad it's still going. It's cool, and he did 6 years ago. Okay. He was the conductor, and so I loved it because what are the two? This is the thing, is I'm like actually really bad with remembering the names of all musical titles. What are his two, like around grade level 4 or 5? They're both lyrical tunes. Like Amazing Grace? Okay, but not that one. The other, Ave Maria. I think it was Sanctuary. The two kids, because Sleep is Whitaker. Yeah, Sleep is Whitaker. So he's like rehearsing the climactic moment of this piece with these kids, and he's just like fine tuning a bunch of intonation and balance and stuff. But he at one point late in the first day of rehearsing, he just keeps rehearsing the same like 18 measures of music over and over again. And every single time they do the climactic part of the music, the hair on my arms stands up. And it's like middle and high school kids, but sure. He has like engineered his ability to get the same expressive musical phrase. It's like you think about someone who like is on Broadway, like they've engineered it. It's like a craft at this point, and they can get the same emotional response out of an audience member every single night, even though it means nothing to them, but they can get the same intended emotional resonance from their audience every single time. But he just kept doing it back to back, like right in front of me, like he would rehearse it over and over again. I would feel it every single time, and I was like, you got to really have your skills down when you can get that
out of a group of middle and high school students who have only been playing your tune for one day.
Right. And when the piece is a great piece too, it also helps. And that's the Sanctuary is a phenomenal piece of music.
Yeah, it was really cool. How did we get on that? Oh, right. We were talking about your score study. All right. So you've got a method that's evolving. You've got some forScore involved in there. I don't know. Do you want to talk more about iPad, or do you want to just go to rep?
Let's go to rep.
You told me in preparation for this that you're very opinionated about choosing repertoire.
Oh, man. Yeah. So choosing repertoire, is that where we're going?
I guess I should prompt this and say that you are notable amongst people who do what you do, and that I feel like when you speak, coach, because for those who haven't pieced this together, I live in Maryland, so you have been involved. We'll talk about this more later. You've been involved with the teachers in my district,
sure,
to a large degree, and a lot of our music programs. So you're around, and from watching you clinic, from hearing tapes that you've recorded when you've adjudicated events, from watching you like coach some of our teachers on their conducting, like just work with their student ensembles, you've remained really in touch, I think, with the repertoire that is realistic in our field, which is grade level, like sure, 1 through 3 or 4. Like you just like this, it's a part of your identity, I think, is that you don't like make a distinction between the college level repertoire and the younger band repertoire. It's all just band rep to you.
And I think that's a huge compliment, the way saying it like that, because it's something that I very much strive to do. So you articulating that, I really appreciate that.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. I feel the same, that you are equally enthusiastic about like a group of 5th graders playing like a grade level 1 piece.
Absolutely.
As you are doing the Mazlanka.
You hit the nail on the head. So let me just, choosing repertoire for me is something that I'm extremely overly passionate about, and it's something I love to talk about. My doctoral work was in repertoire, and I've thought about this a lot, the idea of quality versus quantity. And I always think of pedagogical reasons, I always think of situational reasons, I always think of how I'm going to stretch my students. So I'll give you, if you will, just a little bit of a brief synopsis about what goes through my mind. And I can tell you the first thing that goes through my mind when picking repertoire is a heightened level of anxiety. It really does, because and it doesn't matter if it's the TU Symphonic Band. I did, the last honor band I did before COVID was the Carroll County High School Honor Band. I've done elementary school honor bands. I was middle school band director. Repertoire, I think, for me, in choosing the right repertoire for your kids is one of, if not the most important thing you can do for your performing ensembles. And the reason I say that is, and why I'm saying it that so intently, is you have to take your time when selecting. It's really easy, and it's in no way to be offensive, but it's really easy to go on to something like J.W. Pepper, find editor's choice, see what the new editor's choice piece, and then click buy, which you can do. But there's a whole lot of other things that I feel like people should really think about and really take the time to research before you actually put a piece of music in front of your kids. And I say this a lot. Your ensembles, for example, you've got one shot. So your band, whatever band that you have for that year, you have that year to exist. And after that year, that band, I don't know if you change halfway through the semester. See, I change halfway through the semester. So I'll just use mine as an example. So my Towson Symphonic Band, basically, it exists semester to semester. Every semester that band changes. Like, just kids leave, kids come in, I lose kids to student teaching. And so I take it very personally. I've got one shot to really make an impression and to really give them a meaningful and emotional experience in the ensemble. It's the same thing with an honor band. That band exists one time. They'll keep having it over the years, but it in that part, if that makes sense, it only exists in that time, and then it'll change. And I take that, you talk about a burden. What am I going to feed those students that they're going to get a well-balanced diet of the highest quality food I can give them? I'm hungry. So the things, am I cool? I can go on a little bit?
You can go on this as long as you want.
Awesome. Robby, what I think about, so the first thing I have to consider before I even pick the piece is the educational value. So I take a big, deep look at the ensembles, especially if it's my group. What do I want to teach to them? What techniques do I have to do? What are my educational goals, and what are the outcomes that I want to do? So if I go back to the Carroll County group, which was a phenomenal group, and I'm very grateful to Carl Stewart for having me out there to do that. This is one thing that went through my mind. So one of the pieces I really wanted to teach, I really wanted to stretch them musically. So what piece am I going to do to stretch them musically? Then I really wanted to stretch them technically. So what piece that I want to do that can really give them a challenge playing different technical passages in mixed meter and things like that. Then I really wanted to stretch them emotionally. So what kind of programmatic piece can I do that I can really dig in to the emotion, into the meaning, into like the gut meaning of what and why that piece was written. And then the other thing that I wanted to do is actually I thought about textural playing. So what piece can I pick that will have some major texture changes? What I mean is, like, maybe it starts with this grandiose fanfare and then it goes just down to maybe a saxophone solo with bell accompaniment or something like that. So the audience is obviously getting a very different sort of well-balanced diet here, but more importantly, the students are. And so what that looked like at the end is that piece, the textural piece, was David Maslanka's On This Bright Morning, which did exactly that. There were some very thick parts, but there was also a part where it was just saxophone and piano playing. The piece that really stretched them musically, I picked Eric Whitaker's October. And so the other thing I asked about the oboe player, and they had a fantastic oboe player. That the young student went to South Carroll High School. Then the piece that really was the one that really got them emotionally tied was Omar Thomas's Of Our New Day Begun. And we spoke a lot about why that piece was written, the situation for which it was written for. Then I did a Sousa March because we talked about the history of the band, and I'm a big Sousa fan. And then we ended with John Mackey's Undertow as the technical piece. So if you think about that from an educational standpoint, that covered everything I wanted to teach those students, and they were musical elements that I thought were important for them to do. Then I had to go find the music, and that's what I'll get into here. But besides educational value, when I'm picking music for my students, I'm also thinking about and being honest. And I talk with a lot of directors about, we can talk about what are our best sections in our groups and what are the sections that need to be brought along a little bit. We all have sections that play really well, and we all have sections that need work. It's just the nature of our groups. And we owe it to those students as educators to challenge all of those sections and to make rehearsal and make performances enriching for all of those. So if I've got a great tuba section, I need to make sure I find, and let's say I have a trumpet section that can't play high, for example, then I need to go find a piece of music that will accentuate those two different situations that I have in my group to challenge my tuba players, but also make sure I'm fostering a good learning environment for my trumpets. That's hard to do. You can't just go grab a piece off the shelf and be like, oh, we'll just do this, without really researching if the piece achieves that for your kids. The other thing that I like to do a lot, let me just back that up. And I can tell you, when I first got to Towson, the first piece that I bought was the Lavender arrangement of West Side Story. Amazing arrangement that he did for the Marine Band. And I was getting ready to copy it, but I better wait. And so my first semester group, I'm like, it's not the right fit. I didn't have the right things in place to do it. Then the spring semester, it still wasn't there. And then the next year, it still wasn't there. But finally, the spring semester of my second year, it lined up perfectly. Like, everybody was in the right spot to do it. And that piece challenged them like no other. And that had everything, musicality, technical playing, and all of that. And we did it, and it was awesome. And Jason Fettig from the Marine Band came in and conducted it. And so it was extremely successful. Would it have been successful before? Yeah, maybe, but I don't think it would have been as successful than when I placed it right where I felt it really belonged. And that's just an honesty thing. You being honest with yourself and us being really honest with where our ensembles are at that time. Sorry, were you going to say something?
No, there's two things that jumped out, and I don't want to derail you at all, because I know you're in the middle, you're in the weeds here, you're in the middle of the process. But two things that jump. No, it's all good. I think things that jump out to me is, so you're not necessarily looking for those different elements in the same piece of music. So like, it's ideal if you can resonate technically and emotionally, but you might pick a piece of music that specifically you want to have an emotional resonance with the band, whereas another one might be like more of a technical piece.
Absolutely. And so you will find pieces that, don't get me wrong, you'll find pieces that will do that. So if I go back to Omar's of Our New Day Begun, there's some really technical challenges in there. There's some really difficult rhythms in there. But I think the hardest part about that piece is emotionally tying yourself to the programmatic aspects. It was perfect. And Omar's a friend, but I'm promoting that piece, obviously, because it's an amazing piece of music. And the message that it delivers, you've got the students singing in the middle of it. And so I try to find what that piece exemplifies the most, and then I'll tie it to the needs of my students. So, for example, at the end of my first year at TU, my band was struggling with playing in mixed meter. And so what piece can I put in front of them that I feel is of quality, which we'll get into, that can really assist them in playing in different compound meters? And so I searched and I listened all summer, and I settled on the transcription of Bernstein's Profanation, which every single bar changes. However, and I need to be clear with this, a lot of times, in my opinion, sometimes composers will do this sort of, I don't want to say needlessly, but it's like, let's just dump all of this mixed meter stuff in and make it super hard, and it'll be this and that. Bernstein's piece doesn't do that. It's mixed meter, but it's highly melodic at the same time. So you have things to gravitate to. And the 5/8 sort of flow like they should, and the 7/8 and all of that. So Percy Granger does a good job with that. And John Mackey's Undertow, it's the same thing. So those pieces have some mixed meter things in that I use to teach that concept, but they do it in a way that's very appealing to students, and it's not overly or sometimes needlessly difficult. You have to weigh those things. Is this piece worth the time that we're going to have to put into it? And another way that I do is, as far as choosing music, it's thinking about the ensembles. If you flip over to an all-county band or an all-county orchestra, it's the same thing. The first thing that I'll always ask the supervisors for, and they're always gracious to do this, is I'll say, can you send me the past 3 or 4 years of music that you've done? I don't want to repeat anything, but B, I really want to make sure I'm giving them something that they haven't seen or done before, something new that I can expose them to, a new genre or whatnot. And so when we did, I'll go back just to Carroll County just because that's the last one I did. When I got all those programs, they had never played anything by Whitaker. There hadn't been anything by Maslanka, nothing by Thomas or Mackey. And so I gave them a dose of some new things, and it was great. In that concert, it was just a fantastic concert. And so all that has to go into, this is all my opinion, but all that has to go into the back of your mind as you're getting ready to choose the music for your students. And so what other things that I'll do, I study all summer, and I look, and I know what my ensembles are going to be like, and so I have an idea, but I think about what do they need to be introduced to, what composers am I introducing them to. Then what I'll do is I'll compile this list of music that I feel is what their wheelhouse is, and I'll send it to all my kids. And I'll, hey, check this out, because I also think student buy-in with that is something that's really important. But I'll do the legwork first, and I'll give them a menu to choose from of music that I've vetted, that I feel is where we should be, and then we'll move from there. And I can tell you, it's funny, my second year, we did David Maslanka's Symphony No. 4, a piece that I think is of the highest quality as far as band repertoire is concerned, or wind repertoire. And I gave it to the students, and we read through it the first day, and I got a lot of pushback. It's a piece that's really hard to digest at the beginning. And it's funny. And then I talked right after that to one of the finest educators that I've ever met, and that's Sally Wagner. And she said something to me that really resonates, that I think about a lot now. And she said, Chris, sometimes music that isn't of the highest quality is like eating sugar-coated cereal. You get that first bite, and there's an instant gratification, but the more you chew on it, the more it's, wait, where's the substance? Where's everything else that we're looking for? And so the kids didn't get it at first, but they saw how much I believed in it and how much I believed in them and how much I truly loved that piece. And as it evolved over the semester, the kids were getting to see how if a piece is of quality, one of the I think defining characteristics of a piece like that is it will reveal itself to you over time. And I believe that with a piece like Portrait of a Clown by Cicconi. I think Earth Song is one of those pieces. And you talk about not discriminating from grade 0.5 up to grade whatever. But the Maslanka piece evolved over time, and the kids were just like, they couldn't play it enough, to the point where you can go look this up on Facebook. There's a Facebook group called Towson Students That Want to Play Maslanka 4 Again. And so there's now this group that, and they'll post recordings of it and all that, and they couldn't get enough of it. And so, anyways, so that anecdotally, that's what one of the other things that I think about as far as choosing the music. I also think about what I call cosmetics. And so this is me like briefly looking through the score. And so one of the first things I look at is the instrumentation. I need to make sure that I have the instrumentation. And I'm talking about all the instrumentation. So if I do Lincolnshire Posey, I need to make sure I have an alto clarinet. Like, I can't just not do that because of how important that instrument is. Or a soprano saxophone, and any of that. The second thing I look for is, do I have the right percussion? Do I have enough percussionists to do it? A lot of this modern wind music, not so much the orchestra stuff, but the classical orchestra stuff, but the modern wind music, you could have 15 percussion parts. Or I know the West Side Story had percussion in pods. There were 5 percussionists, but each percussion player had to play 20 instruments. And so I need to make sure I have enough percussionists to fulfill that. And then, of course, then I go and I look at all the ranges of everything and make sure it's appropriate for my students. So if I've got trumpets that can go to a certain level, I need to make sure they're not sitting above that level for the entire time. And so I do the same thing with honor band. And the thing that I meant to mention about honor band, which is great, I'll go back and forth with supervisors and county music educators and say, hey, what do you think of this program? And so the program that I originally picked for the honor band, it changes like 50 times before we actually do it. And I love that because that means there's supervisor and there's county band director buy-in. They really, let's have you thought about this? Or this might be too easy. Have you thought about this? And I love it. I love those kind of repertoire conversations. So after I've scratched the surface cosmetically, then I start digging through the score and I look for a bunch of things. The first thing I look for, honestly, is the form of the piece. And I do this with grade 1 and I do this with grade 6. Is there a form? Is it A-B? Is it A? Is it sonata form? Or is it just formulaic? If you think about a lot of wind pieces, sometimes they can be a standard cookie-cutter form that you've played many times. I tend to stay away from those. I might do one every once in a while, but I look for forms that are a form that's a little bit more obscure. That's why I love Cicconi's Earth Song, for example. I think it's gorgeous, and that is not a formulaic piece. Are
you speaking more to the broader definition of the word, or like literally the form, like the structure and order?
I'm basically speaking slow introduction, fast first section, slow middle section that is in 3, then back to the fast section, and then coda.
Okay, so like the order of how the different parts of the piece are put together, form,
right?
Capital F, form.
And so I am in no way I'm not saying anything negative about that, but I'll do a lot of adjudicating, or I'll do a lot of guest clinicians where every piece is that way. And so I may pick one piece of that form, but I can tell you in my concert, there will be no other piece that will be that form. So the students they basically get that part of their diet once. I caught that from Evan Feldman's video It's on YouTube. I think it's called The Musical Meal. Dr. Evan Feldman is, I believe, still the director of bands at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And he does a lot of really cool videos. And so I caught that from his video. And it's something that I've really attached myself to. The next thing I think about is, as I really dig through the piece, is am I going to find places for these students to play expressively? Are there places? And so sometimes what I'll have to do there is I'll have to slow it down. Is there a slower piece that I can pick where I can really work on musicality, which means I'm not wanting to play everything at quarter note equals 120 beats a minute. Now, can you play musically fast? Of course. But if I'm going to focus just on musicality for my students, I want to take away some of the prohibitors of that. Sometimes tempo might be too fast for them to be expressive. Sometimes something that's too technical makes it a little bit difficult for them to be musical. And so I'll slow it way down and I'll find places where they can really be musical as an ensemble. And if there's a solo, the same way. I spoke a little bit about texture variety. That's a big thing for me when putting a concert together. So it's not always everyone plays all the time, every time. Are there pieces? Julie Giroux's Bookmarks is a great example of this, where she'll have some really heavy, thick textual sections, and then it'll just go down to one or two people playing, or something that's really thin. Mazlanka does this really well too in his 8th Symphony, where everyone's playing at one time, and then all of a sudden the second movement ends with an oboe marimba duet. I think that's brilliant, and that kind of music exists from grade 1 up to the grade 6, or however you want to cap that out. So I love looking for texture variety. And then I guess the last one is harmonic variety. And it's a lot of times I'll hear groups, everything's in E flat, or everything's in... So the students really need to be exposed, in the audience too, to expand their palette of, I'll do a piece in B, I'll do a piece in E flat, or we'll do pieces that change key. So melodic and harmonic variety is something that's really important to me. If we're not careful with the way we pick music, a lot of the times band and orchestra concerts tend to sound the same as we keep going through it. And so how can we make it not? How can we get the audience to say, hey, that's different?
This is a challenge at our level too. We have band pieces that are just arranged into orchestra pieces, and then they just sound like orchestras playing band pieces. Especially tough too. We have a symphony orchestra at Ellicott Mills, and picking repertoire that is not classical arrangements, but that it doesn't sound like band music with string parts hacked on. It's a real challenge.
I go through that challenge because I conduct the Chesapeake Youth Orchestra. I conduct their second orchestra, which is called the Concert Orchestra, and it is finding music of that idiom of that grade level that doesn't sound like what you're talking about that's extremely difficult. One of the middle school honor bands that I did, I really pushed for that textual variety. So I did John Mackey's It Just Left Me, Lightning Field, which really stretched those students. It was a bunch of different sounds that they weren't used to, but the percussion loved it. They were cutting steel bars and hitting all that kind of percussion. What can I hit to make a cool sound? So we did that, and then I changed the pacing immediately, and we did Earth Song. And so it was really, so the audience just was like, what? And so sometimes the audience and your students need a break from just a mass of sound at you. And so then we came back and we did Earth Song, and it was gorgeous. And there was a lot of phrasing and all of that good stuff. And then we jumped right back we did Rampage right after that, which actually I heard that they had a great low brass section. So that's a piece that really features the low brass. Then I did a big piece. I did Balmage's Sun Cycles, which had a little bit of lyrical playing and some technical playing. It was the big piece. And then I ended with Tim Lowe's Mad Dash, which is a great grade 1.5, 2-ish march. But I think one of the most successful things about that concert was the pacing, because it wasn't all of the same sort of band or same orchestra the whole time. There was a large amount of variety there, which I think is really important. And so I do a lot of listening to find that. And I guess the last part of the repertoire selection for me is, and I urge directors to think about this, and I'm not sure directors think enough about this, and I talk about this a lot. So if you're going to conduct a piece of music with your kids, you have to think what they're going to get from it, and what will the educational outcomes be? What are my students learning? I think that has to be first and foremost. But don't forget about yourself. So if you're going to teach a piece of music, what are you learning from it? As a director, how are your skills and how are your rehearsal techniques? How are you honing yourself? We ask our kids a lot, oh, play better, gotta play better. But as directors, how are we getting better? What are we getting out of it? And I challenge everybody that you can do that with any grade in any piece of literature, string, wind. And think about yourself there a little bit. I'm not saying being self-indulgent with it, of course, but think about what you're going to gain from that as a musician. Then you have to start thinking about how much time are you going to do for score study. The class that you spoke with, Dr. Fagan from Central Washington University came in and spoke with him about score study this past Monday. And it was one of the most, I want to be a better musician having listened to him, because he gave me a whole new, fresh approach to score study. And so I urge people to talk about, I'm glad we talked about score study, but talk to people about score study, and then do you have enough time to study that piece? You should never really step in front of an ensemble without fully digesting that piece. I'm not a big fan of, hey, let's learn it together. I think that already starts with like a predisposition of, I guess let's just see what happens. I really think that you need to make sure, and everyone has their own style of score study, but make sure that's digested and you're ready to rock that first rehearsal. Because especially if you really relate and like the piece, you don't want to go in there without an opinion on how that rehearsal and how your rehearsal technique should go. The other two things is, do you have enough rehearsal time? Us in Maryland here, we've got snow days. Well, I would kill for a snow day. That means that we were in school and we don't have school. What do we have here? We have snow days. We had a wind day that one year, I remember.
Oh my gosh, that was that 2 school years ago?
Something, I'll never forget that. But there's testing and there's all of that. We know that there's going to be those challenges. And so do you plan for that? Do you really plan to make sure that you have enough time to actually teach this piece? And again, are you honest with yourself about it? And then the last part, and this is something for me, and people always sort of shake their head at this. Be honest with yourself. Are you ready to teach that piece? Let's not say your students, but are you ready to do it? So there are a few pieces on my bucket list that, I would love to do it. I'm not ready as a musician to do it. So I really want to do Schwantner's And the Mountains Rising Nowhere. I really want to do Jennifer Higdon's Blue Cathedral. Do I have the winds to play Mountains? I do. Do I have the strings to play Blue Cathedral? I sure do. But her piece deserves better than I can give right now based on my pedagogical expertise or lack thereof. Schwantner's piece deserves better than I can give it right now, because I'm not in a place, like I said, pedagogically. Like, I open the Schwantner score and I don't even know what I'm looking at because of that sort of avant-garde notation. In Higdon's piece, her piece is ingenious. And so when I'm
talk about score study, the marimba part to that doesn't have any repetition. It's just 3.5 pages of. I coached a private student of mine on that part, and I was like,
yeah,
because I was like, we're trying to work out stickings to it, and I'm like, dude, we need to spend 3 lessons on this, and this is 3 pages of one player's part. Yes. I get it.
And so but the piece it's a beautiful piece, and so I have to really keep myself in check with that, and be like, I have to wait for that. I was finally ready to do Colgrass's Winds of de Gaulle, and I could not wait to do that. And then COVID came, and then we couldn't do it. And so the last part of this, so I wrote this note down because I always remind myself of this when I think about music. I think about the pedagogical aspects of the piece. So what are my kids going to learn and all of that? I talk about the quality, picking music of quality. I would never give a piece of music to my students that wasn't, in my opinion, of the highest quality. So it's also, choosing repertoire for me is also situational. So and then we'll go back to the middle one. But so if I'm doing an outdoor concert, I'm going to choose music a little bit differently. So like I conduct up at the New England Music Camp, which is a fantastic music camp in Sydney, Maine. Everything's outdoors. And the music that I pick fosters what needs to be heard outdoors and knowing your audience and all of that. Certain things go through my brain when I'm picking music that's going to be all outdoors. If it's an indoor concert setting, it changes. I can tell you the big thing that's changed, the situation with right now has completely wrecked my mindset with how I'm choosing music for my group. But I can tell you, one of the things that I'm not afraid to do, which sometimes we are afraid to do, is you need to ask people, what are you doing? So it's cool. I've asked hundreds of band directors, what are you guys doing right now? What's happening? What are you playing? How are you getting your kids together in a meaningful way to make music together? And so I kept running into walls, and I thought all summer, and finally Brian Baumajor says, you need to check Alex Shapiro's Putting the E in Ensemble. She's an amazing composer. I was getting ready to do her Liquid Compass at CBDNA, but then everything shut down. But putting the E in Ensemble is a piece specifically made for distance learning. It's highly improvisatory. It's a ton of fun for the kids, but it fits the situation perfect. Would that piece work in a concert setting if I were to put my kids on the Kaplan stage? It wouldn't, because it's not made for that. But she has this piece, and it works for middle school, it works for high school, it works everywhere. And the kids are learning, there's a collaborative effort to it. They're learning improvisation. They're learning recording techniques. So they have to go and record their 15, right now they're recording their first round of takes. She comes in and speaks with the students, which is awesome because she's super personable. And so they've got a different level of inspiration now on a different kind of piece that I have never broached since I've been at TU. And so if you don't know that piece, it's in the Creative Directors Lounge. I think there's a Facebook link for that. But it was one of those pieces, I can tell you at first, that I was like, I don't know. But then I dug. And the more you dig into something and the more that piece starts to reveal itself, I'm like, wow, there's a lot here. And there are many things that my students will gain from this. So that piece is a total package with that. There's musicality, there's technique, but there's the recording part of it. They play with drones, so there's electronic. I had one of my percussionists, because they don't have a lot of the big instruments at home, he made a makeshift lawnmower type sound, which was actually really cool, and he put it in the key of A flat. So they're doing things that they've never done before in an avant-garde way, but they're making cool music out of it. And so I'm excited. We're gonna launch our performance of it at the end of the semester, and I hope people listen to it because I'm really proud. And in the end, they'll have written it. She gives you these guidelines, and the kids basically write the piece.
I'm going to link all of that in the show notes to this episode, and all of the many other awesome professionals you have mentioned whose work has inspired you. All right, I want to comment on quality for a second. The whole how are we adapting to COVID thing is actually a bigger topic on the list, so we'll get to that too. But yes. I just have, in summary of everything you just said, and in coming back to my original comment about how a band director, or really just any ensemble director who is thinking musically and passionately about how they program, is at least the ones who inspire me are not thinking about difficulty or what type of environment isn't the right word, but is it a college or an elementary school student? They're just thinking about music, and if they're a teacher, they're thinking about what they can teach through that music. So it's just interesting to me to hear how many parts of that, not every part of your process, but how many of them are actually really similar to how I would expect a middle or high school band director to think. You talk about your trumpets range. That's one of the main things that I consider. I don't just play the music that I think sounds the best and is going to make me feel the best about myself while I wear a suit on stage and wave a stick around. You're really thinking that way. And in the same way, I don't get the feeling that you think about conducting an elementary school like an elementary school either. I think that you're probably thinking about directing an elementary school like you would direct your college group, where you're asking those same questions about connecting emotionally and connecting technically and what's going to be appropriate for them. Yeah,
listen, conducting is conducting. I never for 1 second take for granted, ever, if someone invites me to conduct their band or their orchestra, or if I'm conducting my band in orchestra, that time in front of them is, for me, is sacred. And so obviously we all have a deeper appreciation for that right now. But the way that I work with my kids at TU is the same way I worked with the middle school all-county band in Cecil County when I worked with them 3 years ago. There's really no different. I hold them to the same level of expectation. It changes based, obviously, on the piece, but you can still achieve a level of excellence on the same way on a grade 1 as you can on a grade 6. It's just a different situation. But you can come watch me, and I talk to all the kids the same way. There's the same level of mutual respect. There's a lot. There'll be banter. There'll be joking, but it's all in a really collegial and educational way. But we have to understand as directors, and I know this, that stepping in front of an ensemble is a privilege. Like we are lucky and fortunate to be there. And when we look at all of the mass of our kids, I don't care if it's an ensemble of 8 or if it's an ensemble of 88, you owe it to them to be the best. You owe it to them to give them the best. And I'll tell you a quick anecdote, and this was my first year of teaching. And I walked into to Power Ranch Elementary School, which was actually a K-8 school. It was my first job as a middle school band director. It was called an elementary school, but it was a K-8 school. And I only had one band. It was a 6th grade band because 7th and 8th grade hadn't started yet because it was a brand new school. And I walked in there, and there were 8 kids in my band. And I was like, oh yeah, I just graduated with my master's from Arizona State, blah, and I was conducting in Argentina and China at the time, which was cool. And I walked in there, and there was these 8 kids, and I was just like, I was frustrated. And we had a little rehearsal, and I left, and I remember I called my dad. And my dad was everything to me, and I lost him to cancer a little over 2 years ago. And I called him, and I was like, he's like, hey, how was your first day? And my dad, everything that I am today, as far as I can attribute to him. And I'm like, Dad, they weren't good. It wasn't good. It wasn't. They don't know how to play. This is awful. And I'm going to tell you one thing. I'm like, all right. And he's, and then I'm going to hang up on you. All right. He's like, those kids deserve better than you. He said, don't call me back. And I call my dad every day. He said, don't call me back until you've given them everything that they deserve. He said, I don't know anything about band or teaching, but those kids are there for a reason, and they deserve better than you, and you need to fix it. And I was just like, but I'm not going to lie, man. Like, that is seared into my DNA. And I tell my kids, it doesn't matter what group I'm working with, they get all of me when I'm in front of them. There's no distraction. There's no nothing. It doesn't matter what level it is. It doesn't matter where it is or who it is. When I'm in front of my A group, or if it's my TU group, they are my world. And I make sure that they know that. And so that's the first thing that I tell them. And I find that the music making is much more intimate. And they know that by the way I talk with them. And it goes back to the music that I give them. Sorry about the little anecdote there, but it's important to me because I think about that a lot, what my dad told me. And it may seem aggressive, and he loved me, but he was right. Jobs are tough, and I understand that people we're going to have bad days. I unpack that bad day before I get in front of my kids because they don't deserve to share my bad day. I'll share it with them. I'm like, a lot of the times what I'll tell them at the end of rehearsal is I'll say, hey, thank you for fixing my day. And it's genuine. I'm like, today was a rough day. You made this better. Like, you are all of my reasons. And John Nash made that statement in A Beautiful Mind. And my groups are all my reasons for why I do what I do. So
awesome. All right, I have more follow-up questions about all this, but I'm going to pivot to some other topics
Sure.
that are
Did I answer
adjacent.
Did I actually answer the question?
I didn't really ask you a question. I just said, you have a process for repertoire talk.
Okay, that's it. And that takes a long time because my kids deserve it.
And choosing the repertoire is just one part of the job, but it's almost like a craft within a craft for you, it sounds like. It's not we're not even speaking to any of the technical skills or logistical skills you need to have as a director. You're, of course, in a situation also where there are some logistic skills that are that are required.
Yeah.
Actually, before I address that, I mentioned conducting. I wasn't at least thinking in advance of talking about conducting at all, but I did, having seen you, because most of the conducting I've seen you do actually is like coaching of other people.
Sure.
But I do, one thing that I remember really vividly, it's an experience where I was watching you conduct an ensemble, was when you did the Maryland All-State Band was that 3 years ago?
The middle school band. It was 4 years ago, yeah.
4 years ago. Yeah, so now I'm going to try to... I feel like the way I want to say this is going to not sound like it could potentially not sound like a compliment, so I'm going to just preface it with that it is a compliment.
Just jump in the deep end.
I was just like, when you're coaching, you're widening someone's attitude or approach or making them, you're asking more questions than you are giving answers. So when I'm watching you conduct an ensemble, you have to have some answers that you're going to give kids with your gestures and and of course I'm speaking only to your gestures because I wasn't at a single rehearsal that year. So I don't know what all the many things you told them that were probably very important, but just watching your style was interesting to me because I felt, it just felt very refreshing to me because I hear more people than not tend to tell me about my conducting that it's, and this is true, but that it needs to just like maybe have a little bit more focus to it. There needs to be something for them to latch onto because I move a little bit. But something that I really loved about what you did was how frequently like I was seeing the phrase in your conducting and not like you were leaving the beat pattern a lot is I guess what I'm trying to say. Sure. And in a way, like I could hear a lot of people say don't reflect your right hand don't mirror yourself, but there were times where you were like doing something with two hands that was, but like with space in between them, like literally you were showing a line in the air, literally like drawing a line in the air, and something about it just, I heard that line in the ensemble, but I also heard like this really thick and full tone. It was almost like it was like you were taking the thickest paintbrush, the biggest paintbrush, and just drawing like a really thick, full line. I keep saying the word line a lot, but like you just, yeah, sure. That was like super visible and apparent in your conducting style. And I don't know if you can comment on that if you want. I just couldn't leave this conversation because I don't think I've ever told you how much I appreciated watching you direct the All-State Band that year.
And I remember every piece we played on that concert. It was a great concert. And the one thing that's interesting, you can ask me any all-county or symphonic band or orchestra concert, and I can tell you every piece we've ever done in order because of the amount of time I spend mulling over what I'm going to do with them. It's that important to me. But I teach my conducting students this at TU the same way. You have to conduct with however you're comfortable. I've often been criticized for the way I conduct. And you know me, and if you've ever actually seen me in person, I can be pretty hyper and energized and eccentric or however you want. So I conduct, I'm me. Like I am the most authentic part of myself when I'm in front of the kids. And so my gestures, I feel, are the most appropriate thing at that time and at that place and in that part of the music. I don't have anyone to say, hey, focus or do. If you want to move, if you think the music makes you want to move there, don't nail your feet to the ground. Like move around. It's interesting because when I interviewed at Towson 6 years ago, the kids saw me for the first time and I was all over the place and they weren't really responding. And so it was funny because I pulled them back and I'm like, all right, you know what? Play the B flat scale for me and react to the way that I'm conducting. And I did all this, everything that I would usually do as a conductor. And they started reacting to it. And they started, wow, well, there's this, and this has meaning. So the first thing I did with that All-State Band is we rehearsed October. And I rehearsed it straight through. Then I did it again, and I kept changing things. And the kids, it's interesting to me because I think kids will watch you if you give them something to look at. If we just, this is nothing against anything, but I don't like to just beat time. A lot of the times I'll see conductors just drop their hands and let the music happen. I think that's cool because we get out of the way of it. Or if we're showing long lines or whatnot with our hands, I think that's cool because I think time should be, one of the kids' main responsibilities. And so my gesture at that time, it's not premeditated, it's not anything. It's me trying to show what's in the music. And the nice thing about that concert was we struggled with October. We struggled because I never conducted it the same way twice. I think music's an organic thing, and so it should be able to change. on a dime. And so I told those middle school kids, I'm like, listen, it'll be different. Every time, it'll be different. And I remember in that concert, I felt like this one section was going really well, and we need to hold on to it a lot longer. And I did it, and the kids latched. And there was a really magical moment there where we had done something that they weren't expecting, and they've never done before. But because every rehearsal that I did, I brought the best game that I could with all of my conducting tools, then it was normal. So when I conduct my bands and orchestras at TU, they know that's going to happen. Like, they're used to that now. That all-state band wasn't. And so I work on that, and I work on that with every group, if it's elementary, if it's high school. And so I love that. And people might criticize it, but you know what? I think conducting you in doing your thing, and changing things in the concert like that, it lets you as a conductor be a real part of the music making in the moment. A lot of times the conductors will say, all right, it's the concert, here we go, it's like another run. I don't think so. I think, and if your conducting is showing phrasing and there's some subtle nuance and there's interpretation and you're adding this rubato. I love that about live concerts. If I want to go hear a stock recording, I'll just go to one of the 50,000 apps I can listen to. It's that live music, and then as a conductor, if the kids trust you and you trust them that they're going to follow you, oh man, then the music making at the actual concert is better than anything you'll ever experience.
Yeah, you're getting to a couple times in this conversation, you're getting to really the core of what I think distinguishes this art form. You're talking about this in the moment, with regard to lots of emotional qualities of the music, but also tempo. It's almost like a conversation between the director and the students when they're playing at the level you want them to, when they are where you want them. And I just don't, like in musical styles that don't have necessarily like the same fluidity of tempo, just as an example of one quality, they have other characteristics that you listen for. But being in a wind band, that's a unique thing. That conversation is there, and you can absolutely have that conversation with elementary or middle school students or any level of student. The other thing you mentioned earlier in the conversation, I had to jump on, but I didn't then, is just talking about texture, that ability to have such a large ensemble that's capable. Like, the difference between 1 and 2 musicians is a really big difference. So imagine all the different combinations of that if you're just looking at the numbers, and now think about the fact that they all have different tone color. Like, there's just such a wide possible variety, yes, which is excellent. You're just hitting the core of that. I think it's awesome.
And you can find it. You have to take the time to look. And a lot of summers, that's people like are reading. Do score study. The thing that I like to do a lot in the summer is I'll just go on Spotify or Apple Music, whatever, and I'll put in like band music, and I won't see the title, I won't see the composer, I won't see anything, and I'll just start listening and listening. Or even the teaching through. I say it right. Teaching music through performance and band or orchestra.
That's the one.
Yeah, you can go and you can put all of those playlists on shuffle and just listen, and you never know what's going to strike you as, wow, wait, and then you go back and then you find what the title is and all of that. And then you can go, just keep listening. And I can tell you this, the other thing that I do that I always encourage band and orchestra directors to do, study something over the summer that you're never going to get to conduct. And so you want to talk about honing your score study skills? Study Mahler 6. Study Higdon's Blue Cathedral. Study one of those pieces. Even though I didn't get to do it, like I always take the summer to study something that's going to basically bring me back to earth. And so, The Rite of Spring or something just completely out of your range. What that does is that sort of that
by bring you back to earth, do you mean humble you? What is?
I guess humbling is the wrong thing. That's completely the wrong phrase. Bring you back to why you do it, what it is that you do, because it'll start to refresh and fine tune your score. So if you study this major orchestral work, and then you go back to if you work with elementary school or middle school, it'll give you a new outlook on how you're going to look at that music. or it'll give you sort of a refined approach to, let's look at melodic content and all of that. And so I do it. This summer I did Mahler 6, and it was like, wow. But then when I got back into the music that I was going to conduct, it gave me a fresh approach with score study and how I was going to approach these new pieces.
Yeah, totally. All right. We've talked a lot about, there's a part of rep that's kind of come up in previous conversations on the show. I had Lori Schwartz-Reichel was on. We talked a lot about like diversity in rep, and the word quality came up. And I know you're using the word. I just feel like I want to address this a little bit with you because of just the vastness of repertoire that you've familiarized yourself with and actually conducted and studied. Quality is definitely a word that, as an educator, like I think, okay, there's got to be. The music's got, we always say it's got to be quality. We also say there have to be like certain kinds of skills, whether they be like emotional or technical. There are certain things we're trying to get out of our students, or maybe like you have a weak trumpet section and you're trying to slowly develop a range. There are always these things that fit in helping our students, helping to sequence and demystify that musical process for them, but also then stand for themselves as works that we feel really great about ourselves in our ensemble, putting it out there in front of an audience. I guess the problem that has come up in numerous conversations I've had recently with quality is that I'm learning that more and more people are like, I shouldn't say more and more people because I am also one of those people. It's a more subjective word than I once thought it is. In a time where on the tip of everyone's tongue is a conversation about representation, what does quality mean to you, and like how does the sort of like national conversation that's happening right now, and as it relates to our small band corner of the universe, like how do you see that piece of things fitting in? And I'm thinking and asking this question like in a really big picture way, not necessarily how are people in the band world checking boxes for tomorrow's concert. I'm asking like, what does this look like for the next 10, 20 years and beyond?
So, what part of the question should I answer first? there's a lot there that's going through my mind. If you want to talk, so quality literature, I think, is extremely at the director's discretion. Like let me just, if I can just clarify. I believe in the word quality. I'm learning that it is possible for some people to say it, whether it's subconscious or not. It's coming from a place of misunderstanding or diminishing another person or culture of person's music. Whereas it's easy because we all do believe that there is good music and maybe not so good music out there. It's when you own the word, like this is good music, you put a stamp on it, but really what's actually happening is you're closing yourself and then your students to a lot of music by making that statement. Does that make sense? Yes.
Okay. Sorry, I cut your thought off.
No, quality is extremely ambiguous. I have a definite, strong opinion through my years of being a band director and being a student. No, I can't tell you, Robby, like I can't say to you, this is what quality is. And you really can't say that back to me. It's what's intrinsic to you as far as how you would answer that. I can tell you I would never give my kids something that I didn't think was of the highest quality. That's a personal philosophy of mine. I wouldn't. And so what goes into my thought process when it comes to what is quality music? And this is just me. Like I said, this is the great thing about being a band director. Like you all get your own opinion. Like you do. And I love talking about this, and I always welcome the conversation. Like I always love when people come to me and say, why did you pick that piece when you could have picked these other 50 pieces? Why did you pick that piece when you could have picked all of that? And so quality, what happens with that is it reveals itself to me over time. And David Maslanka was a really reflective person, and it was interesting to hear him talk to me about this. So everything that you and I have talked about tonight as far as repertoire selection is concerned, all of that goes into my opinion on what I think a quality piece is that I want to put in front of my students. Because like I said way at the beginning, I've got this one shot to make an impression on them. And if we think about it, our repertoire is our curriculum. And so what are we teaching? And so I think about the compositional form, for example. Is there a variety in that form, or does it just go from A to B and then that being it? Is there development in the form of it? And for example, I'll take Brian Balmage's Sun Cycles, for example. I think that's a quality piece, and it's a grade 2.5, 3-ish. But the form it's a free-flowing form, but there's different parts of that where the form changes. It goes through different tonal areas and all of that. And so as far as form is concerned, that's a piece that really resonates with me. I also think about, does the piece lend itself, and I'm repeating myself, but are there places for expressive playing? Now, some people will say then, well, what about a march? I think a march is, like we think about Sousa and we think about King and all that. You can play marches very expressively. And I did them, like when I did the Washington Post with Carroll County, it was the same thing. That's all we worked on in that march was phrasing and musicality. And sometimes people think, oh, we're just a march. We could just play straight through it. I don't think so.
It's easy to think of it as like the dance club music of the band world. Correct. Where it's like a 4-on-the-floor bass drum.
And it doesn't need to be. And if you're informed about Sousa marches and you've done the research, you have to reorchestrate the second time through here. And I learned that is interesting from when Jason Fettig came to conduct the band. Let me tell you, there's nothing more terrifying than preparing Sousa marches for the guy to come conduct your band that conducts Sousa's band. So you talk about anxiety. So the other thing too is I talked about textural and harmonic variety. Like I'm looking for all of those things in the piece of music, and along with the educational value that I can put in front of my kids as far as like that teaching tool. So my definition of quality is, obviously, it's different than yours. It's different than anyone else's. But I think about all of those pieces. And then the other thing is, how does that piece, do I have, so let's say I've got like 10 rehearsals or something like that. Is that piece going to pace itself? Is there enough substance there? What I mean by, is there some harmonies and does the melody change and the compass and all of that? But is there enough substance there that I can pace this through 5 or 6 rehearsals? Or if I'm doing the Maslanka Symphony, is there enough substance there that I can pace this through 15, 14 weeks of rehearsal? So I talk about quality and I talk about that. And then what I do is I talk to my students on the very first day of rehearsal, and we discuss about what my opinion of quality is and how the painstaking process I go through to choose music for them. And even after it's over with any group that I work with, like, oh man, did you like that? Did you like that? And it's interesting because then what I do with my kids is a lot of kids will bring music to me. Say, oh, Doc, can we do this? And so I'll sit down. I'm like, well, tell me about the piece. Why does this piece resonate with you? And most of them now will come and say, well, and they'll start talking about all the things that we talk about in rehearsal. And I did that with middle school, I did that with high school, and I do it with my collegiate students, where they'll bring music in and they'll discuss why this piece is meaningful to them. I listened to the podcast that you did with Lori, and the one thing that she said, there's a lot of things she said that I really agree with, but the one thing that she said that I really liked was she said students should be able to develop their own definition of what they think quality music is. I love that, and I've practiced that everywhere that I've gone. And so that answer is somewhat ambiguous. Is it resonating with me? Does it resonate with my kids? And I talk about all those things through the score study process and how the piece reveals itself to me, and then I make that judgment. Now, let me digress. Have I ever been wrong? Yeah, sure have. And there's been plenty of times where I've pulled the piece partway through the rehearsal process. And, nope, this is not the right time. This is not the right piece. And it's hard because, especially in band music, it's really difficult to dig that stuff out. There's so much music being written today, it's almost impossible to keep up with. See, the orchestral world, they've got the masterworks, Beethoven, Brahms, Mahler and all of that. And all those pieces have stood the test of time. You'd be hard-pressed to go for the New York Philharmonic to go look at their concert series and not see a Beethoven symphony on there. That's a great, and that piece has stood the test of time. You think about how many of those pieces do we have in the band world? Like we really don't. You have the whole suites. You can go back to the Mozart and Beethoven harmony music, which was for wind octet and things like that. But we don't have that rich heritage of music. So the composers that are writing today, I'm really interested to see what pieces we're still playing 10, 20 years from now. Does that mean it's quality? To some people, it might mean it's quality. To some people, it might not mean. As long as I think that you have a clear definition in your mind of what you want to give your kids, because in the end, that's the most important thing. So if you have a clear, I'm very opinionated about that. And so I know what I think it is, and so then I'll give my kids that diet. On the flip side of that, though, there's always room for feedback from the students. I'm always soliciting feedback. Hey, what do you think of this piece? What do you think of that? They're to the point now where they'll say, I know it's going to be good because you wouldn't have given us anything to the contrary, which I don't want them to think that way because now they're not thinking independently. But I always elicit feedback, especially with my section leaders. Like I've got a group chat with them always. Hey, what do you think of this piece? How do you think of this piece and all of that? And so I don't know if that answers the question. It's just the way I think of when it comes to quality and why I choose to put that music in front of my kids.
I referenced the Laurie conversation is just because quality is something like you're mentioning all reasons why you can defend the qualities of the music you've chosen and why it's personal to you.
Sure.
Whereas I guess like the flip side of that is to then diminish music because your version of quality as a musician is more limited or closed. And in the band world, we have so much stuff coming out that I feel is challenging even really what, I mean, I know you spoke to a moment ago that we have maybe, I don't want to say a lesser history. That's not the most nuanced way to say that point, but we don't have this canon that's quite as established. Like you don't see a band. I mean, sure, like there are definitely like masterworks in the band repertoire that way more often than others and that are considered standards. But you don't have these composers who, like, it's hard for me to even expect that we would have composers like Beethoven in the band world in 100 years now, where you would, like, certainly there would be composers whose music is still getting played, but never to the point where others are quite diminished, maybe, or where there isn't space for new things. And that's what I find interesting, is because there's a lot of things being written specifically for wind band right now that I think challenge a lot of conventions of even what people think of as wind band music. And I'm speaking stylistically for the most part. I'm not talking about like percussionists or like standing on their heads or like playing synthesizers. I'm saying like gospel music that sounds like gospel music. It sounds like you're in a church service. It's got flute parts in it, but it's written in a way that it's not, the flutes aren't just like playing like romantic era like flute runs over top of it. They're playing gospel. I guess the question is more broadly just asking, like, how do we make space for all of that literature that is so diverse in our art form, and how does quality play into that? I don't know if even defining the word quality is a necessary part of the conversation. It's just something that you spoke to earlier in the conversation. That was why
It goes back to the research part of it that I talked about in the beginning. So we just did Omar's Come Sunday, Omar Thomas, and that piece just won the Ravelli Award. And like I said, Omar's a friend, but that piece challenged the students rhythmically like they have never been challenged in their entire life. I was looking for a piece, and this goes back to my teaching style. I needed a piece because the kids they were playing, that band was playing at such a high level that I needed something in the rhythmic, a slow rhythmic piece, but then something that just came at them rhythmically, and the intense part of it that just never let them stop, and just to give them something to really chew, and for every single instrument, not just the trumpets and the clarinets. And Come Sunday was like a gift to the band world. And that piece is, and Omar came, we did it for our big, huge collage concert. It was fantastic. all of that music exists everywhere. It goes back to the point that we have to take the time to look for it. There are so many great resources that you can use also to find this. Like, we were getting ready to do Chen Yi's Fireworks. It's the piece that she wrote. That's a great opener, and we were going to open with that for CBDNA, and of course we can't right now, but I'm going to revisit that piece a little bit down the line. I was fully ready to do Higdon's Blue Cathedral, but we did her Road Stories, which is one of the first pieces she wrote for Winds. I did that when I was at the University of Miami. And so have an opinion on what you think needs to go into the music that you want to give your kids, and then go use your resources. So there's the Institute for Composer Diversity that Rob Deemer put together, which is a fantastic resource. Kaitlin Bove, I've spoken to her, and I always forget the name of the resource that she has on her website, but you can go to her website and see. I always say it wrong. I don't want to say it wrong. It's another fantastic resource, and you can go and listen, but you have to take the time to dig into I want to do George Walker's Canvas, which is for wind band and chorus. I heard it at CBDNA in, I think, 2002, because I want to start bringing the chorus in and doing these collaborations with chorale, and that piece has that collaboration. So me wanting to do a piece for chorus and band together, and then finding something in there that challenges the students, whether it's rhythmically or harmonically, which it does that, and with musicality and all that piece is another perfect gift. And I've been waiting to do it. In the situation had just presented itself, and again, I'm hoping that I can revisit that. But it goes into taking the time to figure out what you're looking for in music and what you want to give your kids, and then go listen and find that. It'll be there. You'll find it. I didn't know about Omar's Shenandoah, for example, until I accidentally stumbled upon it when I conducted Paul Dembowski's The Anne Arundel Community Band, Anne Arundel Community College Concert Band. And wow, like the flutes are doing these cool key clicks, and it sounds like rain. It's another great piece. And so you can find it. You just have to figure out what's important to you in the music, and then take the time to go look for it. The Maryland Music Education, we always go at the fall in-service, and we do reading sessions. We do music from underrepresented composers, from a wide variety of composers, diverse composers and underrepresented composers, because I want to expose people to all of that music. And Brian Baumbages is a great resource for that. So we'll do Julie Giroux's music, and I love her One Life Beautiful, and then we do William Owen's music. And reading sessions are an amazing way to go hear all that. So go to Midwest, go to the MMEA conferences, go to the Virginia Music Education, and listen to all these reading sessions, and start to hear composers that sort of resonate with you too, and then go explore their music. You can go to Midwest and hear hundreds of new pieces of music, and go sit in those sessions, which I do, and then think, oh, I like this piece, and then go listen to it and dig into it, go to the booth, find the score, see what's really in there that you want to hear, or that you're looking for, and then you can go from there. But the issue is, and I know we do this, but we always say we don't have time, and I'm with you there. We don't. I've got a family, we've got this, and we've got that. I have an illustrious hiking career, but
that you can now track on your Apple Watch.
I know. Well, I don't have yet, but if it's important to you, you'll make the time to research that music and find what you're looking for.
Yeah, without a doubt. I want to transition this to all these topics are adjacent, but what's your cut? Do you, like, we're after 9, obviously. When actually is your cutoff?
It's whenever we're done.
It's fluid. What are you most because I've actually skipped my only structured segments of the show, which is the app and the album thing. So I definitely want to get to those. But what do you, like, is there anything on this list? Like, I think you said you were passionate about involving yourself with the teaching community.
Yeah, I can talk about that a little bit. I have a snippet that I wanted to really say.
You already talked about some of the adjustments to COVID with the repertoire, connected to the repertoire. You don't have to.
The teaching community, people often, like, it's interesting. I love being out in the Maryland music education community. It doesn't matter. Like, anyone who says, hey, can you come out and work with my group? If I can, I will. And There are so many reasons why I do that. One, I enjoy it. I like being around other band directors. I like being around other orchestra directors. Maybe that's selfish. I like doing it. Two, I miss the age group. Like, I taught middle school. That's the longest job I've had. I taught high school. I miss working with those kids. I love the students that I work with at Towson. I miss younger kids. And so those two first things may seem somewhat self-indulgent, but the next thing, it really keeps my rehearsal technique sharp. I rehearse the groups the same way, but for example, when I go work with a middle school band, there's some pedagogical things that I don't have to address as much with my college band, but it brings me back down to, oh wait, I have to remember how to do this. And so it keeps my rehearsal technique sharp. But the other thing that it does, then I bring all of that stuff back to my music education students, and I'm like, hey, just so you know, here's some things middle school bands are struggling with these days. Here's some things high school bands are struggling with. Here's a rehearsal technique that I used today with a middle school group that worked really well. Here's a rehearsal technique that I used with a high school band today that fell flat on its face. Don't ever do that. And so I take all of those experiences and I bring them back to my kids at school, and we talk about rehearsal technique, we talk about literature, we talk about the different counties, we talk about all of that stuff, and it's a service back to my kids. It's a service, I think, to the directors that I work with, because I love doing it, and people ask me to come out, and I enjoy it. Sometimes I'll rehearse the band. Sometimes I'll just listen and just give some feedback. Sometimes they'll have me come out, and I'll fill out the adjudication sheet and give them feedback that way. I like to do it. I need to stay current with what's happening in music education today. Like, I have to. As a collegiate professor that works with students that are getting ready to go out into the workforce, I'm doing them an injustice if I'm not out rolling my sleeves up and seeing what's out there today.
That's actually, interestingly, it shows, puts light on a different dimension of it. I assumed it was much more recruitment motivated.
Oh, has it helped with recruiting? Probably. The instrumental numbers are up, which is always a good thing. If a kid resonates with my teaching style and they want to come talk to me about school, I'm always for it. But I can tell you, I've talked just as much about Towson with these students as I have about Morgan State. Melvin's a great friend. About the University of Maryland, Mike Voda is a great friend. About Frostburg, and Shannon Shaker's doing great things there. If a student comes to me and says, what do you know about these schools? I'm going to tell them everything I know. And you say things with UMBC and Brian Kaufman's there. And so I would never go to a school and say, hey, come to Towson. I also wouldn't go to a school and say, hey, don't go to this school. It's super tacky. It's super unprofessional. I go because it's enjoyable. I learn a lot. I've seen some of the most amazing teaching in this state that I've taken rehearsal techniques off of and stolen. Like Charlie Doherty does this really cool ear training warm-up thing that he does that I'll do in my methods class. I go out there, for as much as people say that, oh, thanks for helping, I get a lot out of it when I go. And it's enriching for me. And like I said, it's stuff that I can bring back to my students. Or it'll be things where if a student's, hey, what's music like in Howard County? And then I'm able to talk about, I know a lot of schools are on this schedule and that, or hey, what's music like in this county? And I can talk about, I know they're on an AB schedule. And so it's just, I can help my kids be more informed, so when they go out and apply for jobs, they can apply in places that resonate with them.
Yeah. Didn't mean to imply that you were a car salesman.
No.
But in that networking piece of it, I assumed was also a big part of it. But it's interesting, I guess, the angle of it that I wasn't expecting, only because I don't know that many people who would go this far to get the results you're talking about. But just the attitude of putting yourself in the position of your students and also the teachers who are, and everything is connected. Of course, you are eventually retrieving these students, whether they come from Maryland or not. But to put yourself in front of the students who are the makeup of who eventually will become the kids in your band, I think that says a lot. And also to just be in the field so that these music education students so that you're staying sharp on these skills and learning from other people. It's just interesting to hear that you go to that length. And I agree. I think I'm biased, and I know that there are a couple places, we can say them or not, in the country that are known for having excellent music instruction for ensembles specifically, or even specifically band. But I really just wouldn't want to work anywhere else. I feel strongly that there are teachers who I can go in and watch them teach, and I can learn new things constantly.
It's everywhere. And I steal from you with things that I see. I won't, but I can list 30 teachers that I've taken things from, because I'm like, wow, that was actually really good. And it makes me better. So why wouldn't I do that? I have the free time. If I'm not out in the schools, I'm going to be sitting in my office buying stuff on Amazon.
Well, here's a question, though. Do you have the free time? Because this is a joke that another colleague made to me once. Was basically something to the effect of, Chris is everywhere. Doesn't he have a family?
And so I can clarify that. So I only do it during the school day. And so I'm out at all these schools. Now, if it's an honor band, of course, that's like a weekend. Yeah. That'll be over a weekend or whatever. But there's two things that I have to make sure. So I do all these school visits, and I love it. And it's, like I said, everything that I've said, I love doing that. But it's always during the school day. It doesn't affect me taking I take my boy to school every morning, and then I go off. And so I'm very honest with the directors. I'm like, hey, I can't leave for your school until 7:30 a.m. So if that's a problem, we have to because I try to meet the band directors when they have band. But if it's a county that's far away, a lot of times directors will get them in an in-school field trip or something like that.
Sure.
But I always do it during the day, and I never ever cancel one of my classes or my ensembles at Towson to do a clinic like that. My kids are extremely important to me, so I would never do that. The only time I'm away would be if I'm doing an honor band or an all-state band over a weekend.
Yeah, it strikes me as totally possible that there is the time in the day for you to manage all those priorities. It's just funny because you're very active on social media, specifically Facebook. So it's that highlight reel effect where it's like when you post every place you go, it's perceived to another person as, man, how does he spend any time with his wife and kids? But then you post hiking pictures of that too. So it's like, how is he everywhere? And if you post everything, then that's the perception.
Yeah, I'm a junkie on there, but I enjoy it. I like promoting how people in this state are doing with their programs. I enjoy doing that. If I can bring some sort of attention to that, I think that's great. The same thing. I like to post, and I get some not criticized, but people ask. I like to post if I'm doing a piece. If I'm doing Omar's piece, I'm going to tag him in the post. I'm like, you should check this piece, because I want people to see it. And so I want people to realize that this is the kind of stuff. Like when we did John Mackey's Wine Dark, I tagged him, check this out. Now it's really hard, but I'm like, you should go listen to this. This is a cool piece.
Yeah, totally. What else do you want to do? So we're nearing 10. So I'm looking at the Zoom here. I'm trying to think of when we actually started. We are
around 7:40.
Yeah.
I do want to tell you my album and my app, though.
No, let's definitely do that. Let's do some album and app of the week. Let me go. It doesn't really matter which. All right, let's do app first. I'll go first. Because I'm gonna tangent, and I feel if I get my tangent over, then it'll leave space for you to just go as long as you want on your on each topic. So, have you updated your phone to iOS 14?
I don't know.
Every year, the big tech companies drop major OS updates for their major software platforms. So if you're using an iPhone, in my case, you get iOS 14. And this is something if you're obviously, okay, so most of the people who listen to the show are at least someone interested in technology. So you probably already at least know or expect that this is coming out. You may even know some specific things about iOS 14. iOS 14, if you are someone who did not know, is a really major consumer-facing release, because a lot of years they do stuff where they make new technologies that developers can do cool stuff in their apps with, or they change, they do deep cut stuff. Now it's one less tap to get directions home, stuff that I really care about. This year they did the first ever major overhaul of what the home screen looks like, the grid of Square app icons.
Right. Yeah, that was one of my favorite keynotes. It's one of the reasons why I bought the iPad. the new iPad was for the iOS 14, which I didn't realize, but now I'm seeing it. I'm going to update it tonight.
Nice. Yeah, because you can, so there for a while now, you can put widgets on your iPhone or your iPad. And for the iPhone, you can't put them wherever you want. You swipe. So from your first page of apps, you swipe to the right, and then you get this place called the Today view, where it's like the date and some calendar events. So apps have for years now been able to put widgets there. And I've got one that like puts some buttons for tracking water there, and that runs some of my shortcuts.
You can put them in the regular home screen now.
So now they're not only can developers like make them look way prettier and cooler, but you can just like drag and drop them anywhere you want on your home screen. And as someone who tweaks how their apps are laid out at least twice a week, like it's an obsessive problem that I have, because I'm trying to optimize the productivity. What are the things I tap on and launch the most? What is the prime real estate for my thumb? Like the things that I tap more need to be right underneath my thumb, whereas the things I tap less need to be in the upper left corner. I do this so often, and now you can not only can you put widgets on the home screen, but there are 3 different sizes, and there are so many cool ones, and they take up a lot of space that apps could be taking up, so you have to be really judgmental and discerning about which ones you do. So anyway, this is going to be a real serious problem for me. I've already been beta testing iOS 14 since like middle of July, and I still haven't settled on home screening. Anyway, all of this is to say there's one app that has a really good widget, and I'm going to talk about that app. It's called Weatherline. Weatherline. I'll do an app pair, because one of all the things that you could use a widget for, glanceable information is crucial. So like calendar is a widget that I like a lot, telling me my upcoming couple of events. But weather is really nice. Even though I have the weather on my Apple Watch, it's really nice to every time you open your phone to just be reminded, hey, and we're all home now. So like my teaching and work life, it sounds weird to say, but it just looks so different now. Like I grilled today. Like the weather was more important to me today, like to my lunch plans for my work, fitting into my workday than ever it would be before. Weatherline is just the nicest looking weather widget that I found. Now it is a paid app. I think they have one of these subscription things, but it is a really beautiful app that has all the widgets look more or less like the app actually looks we launch. It's just a line, and it has like sort of these data points for every hour of the day, and the line goes down if it's going to get colder and up if it's going to get hotter. So for me, that's just like a visual representation of the weather that works really well. This is a music education show. I'm talking about weather apps. Go with me here.
No, it's
but
awesome.
Then there's like an icon on each data. So the data points aren't just dots. It's like an icon that depicts the weather. So like the sun is anytime it's going to be like sunny, or an overcast will be like a cloud. But what I really like is that these widgets, the smallest sized widget takes up 4 app icons. So if you're gonna use these widgets, they're like really valuable. So I wanted to use small widgets so that they take up the least amount of app space, but that are the most information dense and beautiful. So Weatherline is their smallest size widget is beautiful, glanceable, easy to read and understand the information from, but they've managed to fit, even with their little whole like line dot chart thing, they manage when it's raining to even fit a rain graph in the same amount of space. So if it's raining within the next hour, one of these like graphs that shows you how intense the rain will be at every minute of the next hour. So if it's going to be heavy for 20 minutes and you're waiting in the parking lot of the store with your cart waiting for the rain to die down, it's just great. They've put so much thought into their small widget, and obviously so have I, that I have to recommend Weatherline. Honorable mention is for the Carrot Weather app, which is, I believe, the best iOS weather app. And their widget is also really nice.
All right.
One of the best I've seen, but Weatherline takes it for me.
So Weatherline, I'm going to look that up. Awesome. Okay. So is it my turn for an app?
Yeah. What are you using?
Okay. So the app that I'm using the most right now, because this is a side hobby. I dabble in partial stock trading.
Really?
Yes. But there's a lot of different apps you can use for investments, in stock investments. There's Robinhood is one of them. There's Acorn is one of them. And I've messed with all of those. E-Trade doesn't, because E-Trade you have to buy one whole share. And if you want to buy an Amazon share, it's like $3,000. So who has $3,000 just to throw at that? And so I boiled it down to actually the Fidelity app, believe it or not, is one of the best apps right now, and it's the most user friendly, where you can invest certain specific dollar amounts into stocks, and especially high yield stocks that you want to invest money into. And so I live on that right now. And so I move money around. So I've got money in Apple, and I've got money in Tesla, and I've got money in Google, and Netflix and Amazon. And so I track that pretty hardcore, and I watch the news a lot at night, and just to see where, like, you know, we think things are going. And then, but it'll allow me, if I want to take $1 from this and move, now I don't do it in that, but I'll do it in like $5, $10, $15 increments and move money around. In Fidelity, you can do that in real time, as long as they're trading. You can do that, and you can work in cash. And so I'll deposit a little bit of money in there, but all the money I'm using now is money that's already there. And so the Fidelity app, and there's like the trade function, is the easiest one as far as like searching for stocks. It'll talk about trending stocks. It'll say like where they think they're going. There's even blue chip stocks and things like that. So I feel like, what's his face? Jordan Belfort on the Wolf of Wall Street.
Yeah.
But it's awesome. And when I was thinking about which one I would talk about, it's that one, because I play on that thing all the time. And today it didn't go well at all.
Sorry to hear that.
Yeah, so it didn't go well, but things are still very much in the green for me. But that app for me has been something that I've used, and I know it's not anything related to music, but that's how I do a lot of my wife and I call it the fun money.
Wow, what a positive take on stocks. Stocks stress me out. So our financial advisors have guided us. We do invest in Amazon, and we invest in I'm trying to remember the word in stocks it is where you pair stocks that are like complementary towards one another.
I don't know that.
I know there's a word for that philosophically. So we also have stocks. International Paper Company is,
yeah, sure.
Yeah, and they make a lot of the cardboard boxes for Amazon.
Okay.
So that was maybe it's just complementary pair. I don't know. I don't know the word that you in the business you use for it, but that was the attitude that they had about that. And I was like, yeah, sure, Amazon, sure.
That part isn't part of my like financial portfolio. That's me having fun, and it's something I do when I'm not music related. I trace a lot of those. For example, right before Star Wars Episode 7 came out, I put a bunch of money into Disney, and it skyrocketed. But then I knew it would trail off, and so I moved that back into sort of a high-yield tech stock, and what I did, I think, into Google or Apple or something like that. Especially Apple, because Apple's more leveled off right now. They're like in the dollars. But if you look at Amazon, I think it lost $130 a share today. So, ouch.
Yeah, and I haven't been eyeing it too closely, but I can only imagine more people are. I was talking about this with my wife the other day, like we've been locked at home for long enough now that I actually am starting to believe that we're going to see a lot of social change that lasts beyond even when we return to normal life. And I just think a lot of these companies that do goods and services through the internet are as if they couldn't get any bigger. But I think DoorDash is here to stay. I think a lot more people are going to order their groceries online, even if they could go to the store.
Sure.
It's interesting to see this change. So that is a super fun pick. I love your attitude about stocks, that it's for fun money. Super unexpected. I love that.
It's not. This is separate than like our financial advisor portfolio. This is just a separate thing that I've been doing for, 20 years.
So wow. Okay.
Good times.
Seriously, wow. All right. I'll have to ask you some questions.
The Fidelity. It's. I've researched them all, and that one, at least in my opinion, is the best for people that want to not have to. If you don't want to buy an entire Amazon stock, which is a lot of money, you can invest. You can buy partial stocks, and it's got a no commission fee, which is great.
Yeah, I didn't think it could be that as easy as you're describing. I think that's part of the reason I've never really looked into it.
It's great. It's easy, and it's very user friendly. You should put it on your website.
Yeah, maybe I should use it first. You can't totally use it.
You can't do it on. You can't do it on a desktop. The partial share trading only works on the mobile app.
Interesting. Yeah, any app that's like pretty much a mobile first or a mobile only experience intrigues me because, like Instagram, as an example, is like just being this phone experience. Yes. It's just interesting what goes into the thinking behind that. Right. I guess it makes sense. All right, should we do album? I'm going for a group called The Comet Is Coming. And the album is called Trust in the Life Force of the Deep Mystery.
Really?
Yeah. So I have this thing in Apple Music called, I have this thing where I tell Siri to, quote, play music I like, and then I say the room I want the music to be played. So I was noticing that when I would say, not play this playlist or play this album or play this song, when I would say, play music I like, it was somehow leveraging the algorithm of which songs I had not skipped over and which ones I had given the favorite to, and or which things I had listened to. Somehow it was leveraging the algorithm in a way that was really pleasing to me. Modern music streaming apps have no understanding at all of music before 1940, which is a discussion for another time. I'm getting I am getting some quality jazz, but I'm mostly getting folk, hip hop, pop, rock. It's doing a really good job of knowing me, so to speak. So
cool.
Anyway, and every now and then it throws in a thing to try to just test the water. Oh, sorry, I mentioned that because for the longest time I didn't know how to, from the phone, manually tap around to find that playlist because I only had ever triggered it by voice. It just so happens that if you ask Siri to do that, it creates a radio station that is named after you. So I had to go to I had to go to the Robby Burns radio, and now I can tap from my phone. I only ever do this around the house because it's like background. Like it's not ever when I'm just like listening to something with the intent of opening my mind to it. It's just
I get it totally.
I'm grilling. I need some folk, either bluegrass or like some Kendrick Lamar or something. Anyway, The Comet is Coming comes on, and I'm like, what is this? It's like
I have to check that out.
It's like jazz electronica funk kind of a thing. It's like this like really psychedelic like electronica music, but with a lot of reed playing, like improvisational reed playing over top of it. So like the whoa 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 of the synth will be like doubled with a bass clarinet playing that same kind of thing, and then there'll be like a saxophone solo blasting over it, and it's just like out there and cool, and it presses the buttons. Weird named group. The Comet is Coming.
So do you want mine? I have a tie.
Do both.
So I'm gonna do both. Now, one is cheating, but I'm a huge, and this is all I've been listening to recently, I'm a huge Game of Thrones fan. And so I went through, and you can subscribe to this list on Spotify. I made a game with what I think are all the best tracks from all 8 seasons of the Game of Thrones soundtracks. And so I have a Game of Thrones highlights track that I have through Spotify, or a playlist. And so I listen to that at least once a day. And so like I'm obsessed with it. And so I've got 1 or 2 things from every season, but it took me a long time. I listened to all 8 seasons completely through, then listened to them again and picked out what my favorite tracks are from each season and put them into a playlist. And right now there's a whole bunch of followers that I don't know that are following my Game of Thrones highlights reel, and that's a Spotify playlist.
You're hopefully going to get some more followers because you're going to have to share that. I'll post a link in the...
Yes, I'll share it with you. But it's great. And even my boys. So my 3-year-old on the way to daycare in the morning. Yes, do you know Game of Thrones at all?
Yeah, I'm really biting my tongue because I don't want to digress into a conversation about the actual show.
Okay.
When you're
sure. Let's not do that because I can talk forever about that. But so usually, if it's, let me, so 1, 2, 3, 4. So track 5 is where is it? Track 1, 2, 3. Track 4 is the Night King song. And so we usually hit the Night King song from the final season right about 10 minutes from daycare, and that's the first thing. It's like, oh, it's the Night King. I want to hear the Night King song. So he actually knows the light motives from each. So he'll know like the Game of Thrones theme, he'll know the Jon Snow theme, and he knows the Night King theme. So usually when we get in there, he's like, Daddy, I want to hear the Night King song. I want to hear the Night King song. And that is one. The other one that I've become really obsessed with, I don't know if I'm stuck on movie music right now. And movie music's my thing. I haven't listened to a whole lot of band music, a whole lot of orchestra music. And when it comes to like contemporary or any music that has any kind of vocals that's not opera, I'm completely ignorant. Like I have no idea like what's happening in the world of pop music today. My wife makes fun of me a lot for that. But the other one is I've become obsessed with the composer, the movie music composer Junkie XL. And so he wrote the soundtrack to it's not new, but it's...
I'm sorry, what is his name? What is his actual name?
I don't know his actual name, but he goes by the artist Junkie, Junkie, and then XL. He wrote the soundtrack to the new Mad Max Fury Road movie.
Well, I haven't seen that, but it's on my list.
The movies. I like the movie a lot, but the soundtrack is absolutely epic. Like he's like Hans Zimmer, but like more. And it's just, if you like brass and loud stuff and loud percussion, it's absolutely epic. I've been listening to that a lot. Now, I have other soundtracks that the boys like. We listen to Lion King a lot and The Hobbit a lot. But my two big picks for your podcast today, I'm really excited to really promote the Game of Thrones playlist. I call it Game of Thrones Highlights. That's a really original title.
But you name that's why I think why you're getting so many followers though, because that's the title right there. That's what someone.
It's all the best ones. I promise. It's really good. So that sounds self-promoting, but it's a cool playlist, I promise. And then the other one is the Junkie XL soundtrack to Mad Max Fury Road. It's interesting because the only reason I found out about it, and I've seen the movie, but Gary Green, my old band director my old teacher at the University of Miami, sent me a text once and said, "Have you heard the Mad Max Fury Road?" It's just it's so emotional and like, so when he tells me something like that, I immediately go and listen, and I listen. It's just, and there's a regular version and there's an extended version. Both are on Spotify, and I would definitely listen to the extended version. It's got way better stuff, especially the Immortan Joe bonus track.
Awesome. All right, you've inspired me too, because we got like a bigger TV with like better color and all that stuff recently, and it seems
Fury Road.
It's long overdue because it's a very visually stunning movie from everything I hear.
Watch it. If you need to borrow it on Blu-ray, I have it because I still collect Blu-ray movies.
Nice. I love that. The Game of Thrones composer, how do you pronounce his name? Is it Ramin?
I don't know. I don't know how his first name or his last name, but he's awesome.
He also did, I feel like his work on Westworld is my... Because it's not different. That there's a lot of similarities with the music he did for Game of Thrones, but in some ways I feel like it fits that world in a way that I like.
Sure.
It just feels like really specific to that universe.
He wrote the soundtrack to the new Clash of the Titans movie.
Okay, I haven't seen that either.
It's not very good, but the music's super cool.
Awesome. Sweet. App and album of the week.
Did we do... I used... Okay. I guess the only other thing that I used the Fidelity app, but the other thing that I've been using a lot, which I just... And thanks to watching you, like, I've become obsessed with Logic Pro and Final Cut Pro.
They're like the tools of this time, right? If you were a music teacher and or a musician and you were not using those, you are now using those or something like it.
Yep. And especially with the education bundle of it only being $200 for about $800 worth of stuff. It's fantastic. So I use all of that in band. Like we're going to use that for the Shapiro project.
Yeah, they're fantastic. They're really, like, if you've used GarageBand or iMovie before, I'm not going to say that they have no barrier to entry. They do, but sure. At least the graphical user interface is, and some of the behaviors are similar, like just the nature of dragging and dropping stuff in place. And yeah, they really have made good software. That education bundle gets mentioned on by whoever I have on almost every episode. It's just if you're a musician or a teacher, you should just, I don't know. If you got, not that $200 is cheap, but for the amount of stuff you get.
There's five software programs.
And last episode, David McDonald, composer and music theory teacher, was on, and we were talking about MainStage, which is, a lot of people see that, and as if getting Final Cut and Logic for the price of $200 was not enough. Some people will complain, I'll never use these other three apps, and I'm like, okay, it's still an insane deal if you never use them. But first of all, MainStage is actually a super useful app for a musician or a teacher because it's like Logic, but it's meant for just performing the sounds of your software instruments. So I'm actually experimenting a little bit since I talked with David in that episode. I'm experimenting with, Logic is a little bit too robust a tool for me to have my electronic drum set and keyboard running through the Google Meets with my students. So I've been using MainStage instead, which has bigger buttons. It's easier to change the instrument sound, and it's a useful tool. So yeah,
nice. Good
picks. You were talking about a second ago, we talked a lot about self-promotion today. I'd like to give you the floor to very directly self-promote. We talked a lot about Towson University, but where online or offline can people find your work? Are there any places that you direct people towards, social media, or is your dissertation something that is?
As far as it's not, and it's interesting. We talk about the idea, the whole self-promoting. I don't have a website. I've got conducting videos that I do, but they're private. Like I'll use them for if someone wants me to come apply for, like when I applied at Towson, they asked for videos and things like that. And so I'm pretty basic with that. The only thing really online of me is my profile at TU. It's just, people have said, maybe try to get a website, or I don't know why I haven't done it. There's no excuse. I guess that part of it wasn't, I just haven't thought of it.
Yeah. So I'll link the profile page, but if someone wanted to, an idea that we mentioned sparked with them and they wanted to reach out to you, is there a way that someone who's listening could reach out to you? Or
the easiest way is through my Towson email. If they want to just shoot me an email, I'm happy to talk about anything. It's everything we've talked about tonight. I'm super passionate about, or whatever. So if you link my profile page from the Towson University website, the email will be on there, and they can just shoot me an email, and then we'll go from there.
Awesome.
That was pretty anticlimactic. I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's totally fine. Refreshing in a way. Like it's usually just a never-ending list of websites and Twitter handles. Chris, it has been awesome having you on the show this week. It was a great conversation. I'm looking forward to publishing it, and people know where to find you. Any closing words?
No, Robby, I'm glad we finally got our schedules in line to do it. But listen, I'm a big fan of your podcast, and so the fact that you asked me to come on and speak with you about things that I'm really passionate about and things that I'm really excited about actually means a lot to me. So I'm really honored to be here and grateful to be your guest.
Thanks for saying that. The premise of the podcast is to give me an excuse to have conversations with people that I want to have conversations with.
You did it.
I did it. I'm Robby Burns. Thanks for listening to Music Ed Tech Talk. You can find the show's page, show notes for the episode, and my blog at musicedtechtalk.com. You can subscribe to blog posts through an RSS app of your choice, and you can subscribe to the podcast in the podcast app of your choice. You can now get blog posts delivered right into your email inbox once a week. Please rate and review in the podcast app. It absolutely helps. It'll take a second and a few taps. Word of mouth is helpful too, so please spread the word. Learn more about my music and teaching career at robbyburns.com. I'm on Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube at Robby Burns. Thanks to this episode's sponsor, Music First. Be sure to check them out. See you next time.